help but see, pretty woman, and you look lovely.
The camera glides down Rodeo Drive, past gleaming storefronts and impossible wealth, until it finds a man standing on a balcony, watching the city lights spread below like a constellation of broken dreams. Richard Gere in Pretty Woman, wearing that perfect suit, his silver hair catching the light, and when he looks at Julia Roberts with that mixture of longing and loneliness, you understand that money can't buy what he's searching for. It's 1990. The film becomes a cultural phenomenon, grossing over $460 million worldwide, and Richard Gere is at the absolute peak of movie stardom. Handsome, charismatic, commanding the screen with an elegance that seems effortless. He's been a leading man for over a decade, the embodiment of sophisticated American masculinity, the actor who made women swoon and men want to be him. But here's what audiences didn't know as they watched Edward Lewis transform through love. Richard Gere was already transforming through something else entirely. Buddhism, meditation, a spiritual seeking that would eventually become more important than any Hollywood success. Within a few years of Pretty Woman, at the height of his powers, Richard Gere would begin a quiet withdrawal from the machinery of fame, choosing peace over stardom, activism over acclaim, a life of meaning over a life of visibility. This is the story of why. Richard Tiffany Gere was born on August 31st, 1949, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, into a middle-class family that valued discipline and achievement. His father, Homer, was an insurance agent, methodical and conservative. His mother, Doris, was a homemaker who raised 5 children with practical efficiency. The Gere household was orderly, religious, they were Methodists, and conventional in every way. Richard was the second child, a boy who showed early signs of exceptional talent but also restlessness. He was athletic, playing trumpet, excelling in gymnastics, the kind of kid who succeeded at everything he tried but never seemed satisfied. There was something searching in him even as a child, a questioning nature that chafed against the certainty his parents' religion offered. He attended North Syracuse Central High School, where he was a star athlete and musician, graduating in 1967 with offers to attend college on a gymnastics scholarship. He enrolled at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, planning to study philosophy, drawn to questions about meaning and existence that his Methodist upbringing couldn't answer. But after 2 years, he dropped out, feeling confined by academic structure, needing something more immediate and visceral. He moved to New York City with the vague intention of becoming an actor, though he had no training and no connections. New York in the early 70s was dangerous, dirty, electric with artistic possibility. Richard studied at the Provincetown Playhouse, took odd jobs, lived in cheap apartments, and threw himself into theater with monastic intensity. He was strikingly handsome. Those eyes, those cheekbones, that combination of beauty and intensity that made people unable to look away. But more than beauty, he had presence, an ability to command attention without seeming to try. His theater work gained notice quickly. He appeared in productions on and off Broadway, earning critical praise for his combination of physicality and emotional depth. In 1973, he originated the role of Danny Zuko in the London production of Grease, showing he could do musical theater as well as drama. Directors saw in him a rare combination, leading man looks with serious actor commitment. His film career began modestly with Report to the Commissioner in 1975 and Baby Blue Marine in 1976, but his breakthrough came in 1977 with Looking for Mr. Goodbar, playing a disturbing sociopath opposite Diane Keaton. The role was dark, dangerous, the opposite of conventional leading man material, and Richard inhabited it with unsettling authenticity. Critics noticed he wasn't just another pretty face. He was willing to go to uncomfortable places to subvert his good looks with psychological complexity. Then came 1980 and American Gigolo, and Richard Gere became a movie star. Paul Schrader's film about a high-end male escort was stylish, erotic, morally ambiguous, and Richard was mesmerizing in it. He brought to the role of Julian Kay a combination of physical perfection and emotional emptiness, showing a man who turned his body into a commodity and lost his soul in the process. The film was controversial, featuring nudity and sexuality that pushed boundaries, but it made Richard Gere a household name. That image of him doing arm curls while philosophizing, the Armani suits, the Giorgio Moroder soundtrack, it defined an aesthetic. More importantly, it established Richard as a serious actor willing to take risks, someone who chose interesting projects over safe commercial fare. The 80s became Richard's decade. He starred in An Officer and a Gentleman in 1982, playing a troubled Navy aviation candidate opposite Deborah Winger, and the film was both a critical and commercial smash, grossing over $190 million. That final scene where he carries her out of the factory in his white uniform became one of cinema's most iconic romantic moments. Richard was now a bona fide leading man, commanding substantial salaries, getting offered every major role. But he was also beginning a spiritual journey that would eventually supersede his career. In the early 80s, he discovered Buddhism, specifically Tibetan Buddhism, and it resonated with him in ways Christianity never had. The emphasis on compassion, on understanding suffering, on seeking enlightenment through practice rather than faith, it answered questions he'd been asking his entire life. He met the Dalai Lama in 1982, and the encounter was transformative. Here was a spiritual leader who embodied peace, wisdom, humor, and genuine compassion, everything Richard had been searching for. He began studying seriously, meditating daily, traveling to India to learn from Tibetan teachers. His commitment wasn't casual or celebrity dilettante. It was deep, disciplined, life-altering. Buddhism taught him that attachment causes suffering, that ego is an illusion, that true happiness comes from inner peace rather than external achievement. And suddenly, his Hollywood career, the fame, the money, the adulation, started feeling hollow. Not worthless, but hollow. What was he actually building? What lasting value did movie stardom create? Throughout the mid-80s, Richard continued working, but he was increasingly selective about roles. He starred in The Cotton Club in 1984, No Mercy in 1986, Internal Affairs in 1990. All solid performances, but nothing that recaptured his earlier commercial heat. And then came Pretty Woman in 1990, and Richard was catapulted back to the stratosphere. The film's success was massive, unexpected, and Richard played Edward Lewis with a combination of charm and emotional availability that made audiences fall in love with him all over again. He was 40 years old, still devastatingly handsome, at the peak of his powers. Studios wanted him for everything. He could have ruled Hollywood for the next decade, but something had fundamentally shifted inside him. What was the first film where you saw Richard Gere? Was it Pretty Woman, understanding that loneliness could exist even in luxury? Was it An Officer and a Gentleman, believing in transformation through love? Drop a comment. I first saw Richard in Film Name, and what struck me was, I read every single story, and your memories shape which forgotten stars we explore next. In the early 90s, Richard began using his platform for activism, specifically for Tibetan human rights. China's occupation of Tibet and persecution of Tibetan Buddhists became his primary cause. He spoke at rallies, organized benefits, used award show speeches to bring attention to Tibet's plight. In 1993, at the Academy Awards, he went off-script during a presentation to denounce China's human rights abuses. The moment was jarring, controversial, and it had consequences. China banned his films. Major studios became wary of casting him in projects with Chinese financing or distribution, and Hollywood, which has never valued actors who prioritize politics over profit, started viewing Richard as difficult, unreliable, someone who'd sacrifice box office for principles. The roles changed. Richard continued working throughout the 90s. Summersby in 1993, Intersection in 1994, First Night in 1995, Primal Fear in 1996. But the projects were increasingly commercial misfires or critical disappointments. The industry buzz suggested he was past his prime, that younger actors had supplanted him, that his activism had made him box office poison in crucial international markets. But Richard seemed unbothered by Hollywood's cooling toward him. He'd found something more meaningful than fame. His Buddhist practice deepened. He established the Gere Foundation in 1991 to support humanitarian work. He became one of the most visible Western advocates for Tibet, meeting regularly with the Dalai Lama, funding schools and hospitals for Tibetan refugees, using his wealth and platform for causes that mattered to him. There's a moment, I imagine, more emotional truth than literal fact, that captures Richard's transformation. Picture him in a meditation retreat somewhere in the Himalayas, early morning, sitting cross-legged in silence. He's 50 years old, still recognizable as the movie star, but the trappings of fame feel distant, irrelevant. He's surrounded by monks who don't care about his filmography, in a place where his identity as Richard Gere means nothing. And in that anonymity, that stripping away of ego and recognition, he feels more himself than he ever has in front of a camera. The question isn't whether to continue acting, it's whether acting serves his practice or distracts from it. By the late 90s and early 2000s, Richard had largely stepped back from leading man roles. He did character work in films like Runaway Bride in 1999, reuniting with Julia Roberts, and Chicago in 2002, where he played lawyer Billy Flynn and showed he could still command the screen. Chicago won Best Picture, and Richard's performance earned a Golden Globe. He was in his 50s now, aging gracefully, still working but no longer chasing stardom. He married model Carrie Lowell in 2002, his second marriage, the first to Cindy Crawford, having ended in divorce, and had a son. He split his time between New York and various international locations, living a life that prioritized meaning over visibility. The 2000s and 2010s found Richard Gere in an unusual position for a former A-list star. He was working steadily, but under the radar, doing small independent films that paid modestly, but interested him artistically. He was in Shall We Dance in 2004, The Hoax in 2006, Arbitrage in 2012, where he delivered one of his finest performances as a hedge fund manager unraveling under moral and legal pressure. The film was critically acclaimed, and Richard's work was praised as his best in years. But the film made only modest money, and Richard seemed perfectly content with that. He wasn't chasing hits. He was choosing projects that challenged him, working with directors he respected, and spending the rest of his time on activism and spiritual practice. His commitment to Tibet never wavered, even as it continued to cost him professionally. He was banned from being an Oscar presenter because the Academy feared offending China. He lost roles in major films because studios wouldn't risk Chinese market access. But Richard never recanted, never softened his criticism of China's human rights abuses, never chose career over conscience. In interviews, he was philosophical about the professional costs, explaining that Buddhism had taught him non-attachment, that clinging to fame or wealth or status causes suffering, that the only meaningful life is one lived according to your values. In 2018, Richard married Alejandra Silva, a Spanish activist 33 years his junior, and they had 2 sons together. He became a father again in his late 60s, approaching fatherhood with the same mindful intentionality he brought to everything else. He continued acting occasionally. Norman in 2016, Three Christs in 2017, Maybe I Do in 2023, small films that rarely found wide audiences but represented work he valued. He looked different now, older obviously, his face carrying the lines of age and wisdom, his silver hair and weathered features giving him a gravitas that his youthful beauty never had. But more than looking older, he seemed more peaceful, more settled, more genuinely content than the restless young actor who'd conquered Hollywood 40 years earlier. Looking at Richard Gere's trajectory from beginning to now, the conventional narrative might suggest decline. The star who let activism derail his career, who couldn't sustain leading man status, who aged out of Hollywood relevance. But that narrative fundamentally misunderstands what Richard Gere chose and why. He didn't fail at maintaining stardom. He opted out of the pursuit of it. He found something that mattered more than box office receipts or magazine covers or the validation of an industry built on superficiality. He found spiritual practice that gave him peace. He found activism that gave his privilege purpose. He found a way to live that aligned with his deepest values, even when it cost him professionally. There's profound courage in his choice, something that speaks to anyone who's ever felt the tension between external success and internal truth. Richard Gere reminds us that fame is empty without meaning, that wealth means nothing without purpose, that the bravest thing you can do is sacrifice what the world tells you to want in order to pursue what actually makes you whole. He was everywhere in the 80s and 90s, the embodiment of sophisticated American masculinity, the actor who made elegance look effortless. And then he chose something else. Not poverty or obscurity, but a life where acting was one part of a larger practice. where stardom served values rather than ego, where peace mattered more than prominence. Today, Richard Gere is 75 years old, still acting occasionally, still advocating for Tibet, still practicing Buddhism daily, still living according to principles that cost him millions in lost opportunities but earned him something more valuable: integrity. He's spoken about aging, about the freedom that comes from no longer being the leading man, about how Buddhism prepared him to accept impermanence and change. He's philosophical about his career, understanding he could have been bigger, richer, more decorated if he'd played the game differently. But he also understands what that would have cost him spiritually, and the trade was never worth making. If this story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more explorations of actors who defined our memories and then chose their own paths. Drop a comment with another forgotten star whose story deserves to be told. I read every single one. Richard Gere taught us that success without meaning is hollow, that principles matter more than profit, that true peace comes from living according to your deepest values regardless of external consequences. He chose peace over fame, activism over acclaim, spiritual practice over stardom, and in doing so, showed us what a truly successful life actually looks like. One lived with intention, compassion, and unwavering integrity.